Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, Deputy Vice Chancellor Research, Innovation and Strategic Partnerships, the Registrar, the University Librarian, the Provost of the College of Medicine, Dean Faculty of Environmental Design and Management, Deans of other faculties, the Postgraduate School and of Students, Directors of Institutes and Centers, Heads of Departments, Members of University Senate, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The 438th in the University of Ibadan inaugural lecture series will be delivered this evening by Professor Sanni of our Department of Urban and Regional Planning on behalf of the Faculty of Environmental Design and Management. Born on 16th February 1956 into the family of late Pa Samuel Araye Shebotan Eluwole Sanni and late Mama Comfort Kokumo Oladoyin Okpa Sanni ni Elutidoye of Obbalufon lineage in Ilara compound, Iremo, Ile-Ife, in Osun State. The young Sanni had his primary education at St. Bernard's Catholic Primary School, Lagiri Road, Iremo, from 1962 till 1967. For his secondary education, he was at St. John's Catholic Grammar School, Okeatan, Ilode, between 1972 and 1976, both at Ile-Ife. He was offered admission to study for a Bachelor of Science Honours Degree program in Urban and Regional Planning at the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, in 1978, which program he completed in 1983. Thereafter, he participated in the National Youth Service Corps scheme as a town planner at the Kano State Urban Development Board, Kano, from March 1984 to February 1985. He had a stint as principal partner, planner, and head of fiscal planning unit, El Sanni Arewa and Co. Planners and Development Consultants, from 1986 till 1988, during which he completed the MSc program in the same area of specialization at his alma mater, the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. He served as lecturer grade 3 and 2 between January 1989 and March 1994 at the Department of Town and Regional Planning of the Federal Polytechnic Nasarawa in Nasarawa State, and assistant lecturer at the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Ladoke Akintola University of Technology, Ogumosho, as well as assistant lecturer, lecturer 2 and lecturer 1 in the Department of Geography of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, from November 1995 till year 2005, during which period he registered for a PhD Geography degree program at the University of Ibadan. In 1995, specializing in urban and regional planning, he completed his PhD in year 2005. The then Dr. Sanni joined the services of this institution as lecturer grade 1 with effect from 15th May, year 2005. He was promoted to the grade of senior lecturer with effect from 1st October 2008, reader with effect from 1st October 2011, and a professor of urban and regional planning with effect from 1st October 2014. He has over 50 academic publications in both local and international outlets, out of which 3 are books and that were co-authored either singularly or co-authored with others. 9 chapters in books, 3 conference proceedings, as well as journal articles. He has successfully supervised more than 100 MSc dissertations, 2 MPhil dissertations, and 2 PhD theses. Within this university, Professor Sanni has served in many capacities, such as Associate Lecturer on the MSc Housing Program of our Department of Urban and Regional Planning since 2004-2005 academic session till date, Course Advisor to Housing Students 2006-2011, Departmental Postgraduate Coordinator 2010-2012, and Acting Head, Department of Urban and Regional Planning 2012-2014. Member of the Faculty of the Social Sciences Students Help Center since 2010, and representative of the Faculty of Environmental Design and Management at the Central Academic Staff Appointment and Promotions Committee since April 2018. Outside the University of Ibadan, Professor Sanni has served as external examiner to Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Ladoke Akintola University of Technology, Ogumosho, University of Lagos, Akoka, Lagos, and Pan-African University Life and Art Sciences Institute, Paulisi, including Health and Agriculture, at the University of Ibadan. He has also served as a member of the selection panel for professor in the Department of Demography and Social Statistics, Federal University, Oyo-Ekiti, in the Ekiti State. Reader, Department of Urban Regional Planning and Geography, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. Head, Department of Urban Regional Planning, Olabisi Onabanjo University, Ago-Iwoye, as well as Dean, Faculty of Environmental Studies, College of Engineering and Environmental Studies, Olabisi Onabanjo University, Ibogun Campus, Ogun State, during his sabbatical leave from 2015 to 2016. A recipient of the Senate Research Grant of this university, Prof. Sanni is a member of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners and is a registered professional town planner by the Town Planners Registration Council, TOPREC. Professor Lekan Sanni is happily married to Chief Dr. Oluyemisi Sanni, and the union is blessed with children. I now call on Professor Lekan Sanni to deliver his lecture titled Housing Nigerians, a Paradox. Professor Sanni.
The Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor Administration, Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, Deputy Vice Chancellor Research, Innovation and Strategic Partnerships, Registrar, Librarian, Provost of the College of Medicine, Dean of the Faculty of Environmental Design and Management, Dean of the Postgraduate School, Deans of other faculties and of students, Directors of institutes, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. With gratitude to the Almighty God for His mercies, I feel highly honored and privileged to be invited to present my inaugural lecture, which is the 348th in the university, the 4th from the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, and the 1st in the Faculty of Environmental Design and Management. The first inaugural lecture in the department, delivered by Professor Layi Egunjobi, the Pioneer Director and Head of Department of Urban and Regional Planning, on the 21st of October 1999, was titled Our Gasping Cities. He raised some topical issues on Nigerian cities that are still very relevant today. The second, titled The Housing Debacle, was delivered by Professor S.B. Agbola on the 4th of August 2005. He shed more light on salient issues in housing delivery in Nigeria and recommended some strategies that are still very much germane to housing delivery in the country. The third was presented on 28 September 2012 by Professor C.O. Olatubara, the Pioneer Dean, Faculty of Environmental Design and Management. He titled his inaugural lecture, Housing in Nigeria, the Socio-Cultural Milieu, in which he chronicled the diverse ways socio-cultural attributes of the citizens influence housing provision, delivery, and consumption. Strategies proposed by him to incorporate the citizens' socio-cultural attributes into housing delivery are still very much relevant today. As the presenter of the 4th inaugural lecture in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, and the 1st in the Faculty of Environmental Design and Management in the university, I count myself to be very privileged and favored in that my professorship of just 4 calendar years was announced in February last year, 2017. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I have chosen the title, Housing Nigerians, a Paradox, for my lecture. This reflects my long-standing interest in contemporary housing challenges and efforts in providing lasting solutions to these challenges, which has been a very significant area of my research activities since I started my career as a university lecturer in 1994. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, in responding to the assignment given by my Dean and my Head of Department to present an inaugural lecture on behalf of the Faculty of Environmental Design and Management, I took stock of my sojourn in academia. During the course of my 24-year sojourn in lecturing urban and regional planning in Nigerian universities, I have devoted some quality time to conducting researches in two main areas of the profession based on the main questions that have always agitated my mind. The first is spatial differentiations in the level of development between and within regions. The second is housing, is administration, production, and management. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, in the course of my various researches on housing, in which Nigeria in general and southwestern Nigeria in particular served as my laboratory in the past 24 years, I have come to realize that next to food, housing is the main commodity that attracts the attention of both the people and the governments in Nigeria. Yet, its adequate qualitative and quantitative provision persistently eludes the nation. My interest in housing predated my formal education. It started with the various insights I gleaned from my parents' discussions with their friends, relatives, and colleagues as I sat at my father's feet in our ancestral home in Ilara compound, Iremo Ile-Ife. It was at that time that I learned informally the cultural importance of housing and the fact that not everybody could own a house. This informal knowledge was later developed, sharpened, and made more meaningful by my exposure to wider and more intensive studies on housing development and management, including my various academic researches, some of which I will be sharing in the course of this lecture. It is, however, pertinent to stress at this juncture that the more I investigate into housing in Nigeria, the more of a paradox housing Nigerians become to me. For instance, the more the governments at various levels talk of housing and the more money is budgeted for housing, the more acute and more grueling the housing shortage in the nation becomes. Hence, my describing housing, the Nigerian populace, as a paradox. Today's inaugural lecture presents me with the first rare opportunity to present before eminent scholars my various contributions to housing studies, culminating in my identifying the paradox in housing Nigeria and providing workable strategies to address housing paradox in the country. Hence, today's inaugural lecture is titled Housing Nigerians, a Paradox. Understanding this topic requires a painstaking insight into the root or genesis and the evolution of housing challenges in Nigeria. To this end, the rest of this lecture is structured into 5 sub-themes, which are: 1, some conceptual issues in the lecture; 2, overview of housing in Nigeria since the pre-colonial era to date; 3, my contributions to housing studies; 4, explaining the paradox; and 5, the way forward. Some conceptual issues in the lecture. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, it is very important at this juncture to clarify some conceptual issues, especially the concepts of housing, adequate housing, and paradox, to remove possible ambiguities in the very pivot on which today's inaugural lecture rests. Concept of housing. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, that we all woke up in a house and we hopefully return into one for the night gives every one of us the assumption that conceptualizing housing is a very easy task. In the first instance, housing is perceived as a product. In this wise, housing is equated with shelter, home, or place of abode, etc., without giving much attention to availability of ancillary facilities, amenities, and services that could enhance the comfort, convenience, and general well-being of human beings that will inhabit the housing product. In its earliest conceptualization, housing is perceived as a product. Agbola 1987 perceives housing as both a product and a process, and provides a very comprehensive conceptualization of housing in these two realms. Nigeria's national housing policy are thus conceptualizing housing as a process. In this lecture, the practice of conceptualizing housing as both a product and a process that I have adopted throughout my 24 years sojourn in housing will be upheld. Housing Nigerians becoming a paradox will thus be viewed quantitatively, qualitatively, and in terms of the housing process. Concept of adequate housing. In this lecture, housing adequacy of Nigerians is measured in terms of legal security of tenure, availability of services, materials, facilities, and infrastructure, affordability, habitability, accessibility, location, and cultural adequacy as advocated in paragraph 8 of United Nations 1991. Concept of paradox. In this lecture, housing Nigerians become a paradox in the sense that housing shortage, especially for the low and medium income earners in the nation, increases the more the government talks of providing adequate housing for all Nigerians. Overview of housing in Nigeria since pre-colonial era to date. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, in this lecture, overview of housing Nigerians since pre-colonial era will be done in three main eras, which are the pre-colonial era, the colonial era, and since the nation's political independence in 1960. Housing Nigerians in the pre-colonial era. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, available evidences reveal that urbanization, the act of people agglomerating in cities, is not alien to Nigeria. Before colonialization, various empires flourished in the geographical space occupied by the present-day Nigeria. For instance, empires that include the Kanem Borno, Chokun, Nupe, and Nasa Fulani flourished in northern Nigeria, while empires that include Oyo, Benin, and Kalabari flourished in southern Nigeria. Available evidences also affirm the fact that some prevailing physical, social, cultural, economic, and political factors play significant roles in housing provision in these various empires. For instance, communal ownership of land in which citizens have usury and not absolute right, with land commodification being unheard of, was the common land tenure system throughout the pre-colonial communities in the country. Housing development relied wholly on local building materials, construction skills, and labor available within the various communities. Traditional cooperative practices guaranteed ready pool of age grades to assist in actual building construction with no significant financial burdens. Design of buildings was dictated by the functions, traditional norms, available materials, and affordability, such that the products were weather responsive and environmentally friendly. Houses were generally perceived in terms of providing shelter from elements of weather, place for storage of valuable things, place of security, and place of rest. House ownership was one of the major prerequisites for being awarded the chieftaincy title in many Nigerian communities. It could thus be conveniently affirmed that housing construction and management in the pre-colonial era did not require much financial commitment, and that pre-colonial communities in Nigeria, especially in Yoruba towns, did not have any significant quantitative housing shortage, as everybody had a place to lay his or her head, and visitors were always welcome and readily provided spaces to sleep whenever they came. Housing Nigerians in the colonial era. The coming of the colonialists have tremendous effects on every facet of Nigerian life, especially housing. Introduction of slave trade and Western industrial products, especially gun and gunpowder, have left indelible footprints in the nation's sand of time. For instance, inter- and intra-community clashes were exacerbated, resulting in mass immigration of people from unsecured settlements for more secured towns like Ibadan, Ile-Ife, and Idonri, among others. Cash crops were introduced that economically empowered Nigerians, boosting their effective housing demands. Colonialists also introduced Christianity, which together with introduction of Western education and poll tax, which must be paid with the colonialist imposed currency coins, delivered a great blow to the cultural values of Nigerians, especially in relation to housing. Traditional institutions, especially those that had traditional religious attachments, were demonized. Neglected family structure was promoted in place of the age-long extended family structure. Monogamy was emphasized in place of polygyny. Individualism was encouraged against community spirit. Emphasis of colonialists on urbanization as a development paradigm marked the genesis of mass urbanization in the country, as access to modern facilities, amenities, and services, together with employment opportunities that will be paid for in European currencies, were only available in the urban areas. Several legislations were made to legalize the colonialist actions. Traditional building construction process was greatly altered as new modern imported building materials like cement blocks, cement mortar, corrugated iron sheets, and iron rods for reinforcement of structure, etc., became the norm. Unlike traditional building materials, imported modern building materials required more capital outlay to procure. Special skills were also required in handling these imported building materials. Hence, the emergence of professional building artisans in form of bricklayers, carpenters, etc., whose services required payment in cash. In colonial era Nigeria, putting up a building thus became a more capital-intensive venture than it used to be. Housing Nigerians since independence to date. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, my focus in this section of the inaugural lecture is on government's involvement in housing provision. This approach is born out of my realization that the government assumed key roles in housing throughout the country at a rate it never did during the pre-independence era. Government's involvement in housing provision. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, it is on record that not much success was recorded in the government's involvement in housing provision till the outbreak of the Civil War in 1967, which involved much depletion of the inadequate housing stock in the nation, especially in the areas directly hit by the war. Mass emigration of people from the war-ravaged areas to cities exacerbated housing challenges in these cities. In 1971, the federal government intervened positively for the first time by setting up the National Council on Housing, consisting of state commissioners responsible for housing. In the nation's second National Development Plan of 1972, the federal government intended to construct 59,000 dwelling units. In 1973, the Federal Housing Authority was created to coordinate this nationwide program. At the end of the plan period, only 1,080, constituting mere 12% of the targeted housing units, were constructed. During the third National Development Plan of 1975 to 1980, the federal government decided to participate directly and actively in housing provision rather than leaving it principally to the private sector. The government budgeted for the construction of 202,000 dwelling units, out of which less than 15% were constructed at the end of the plan period. In addition to setting a target of constructing 202,000 dwelling units, the 1975 to 1980 era is also noted for some landmark activities in providing housing for Nigerians. Housing provision was one of the cardinal campaign promises of the National Party of Nigeria, NPN, that won the presidential elections of 1979 To fulfill its electoral promises, the government planned to directly construct 160,000 dwelling units over a period of 4 years, spanning 1979 to 1983, at the rate of 40,000 units per year. By June 1983, the fourth year, only 20% of the budgeted 160,000 units have been completed. Major reasons identified for the observed failure of the government to meet its various housing targets include corruption, inadequate manpower, and inadequate access to land for mass housing provision. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, on December 31, 1983, the civilian government was overthrown in a military coup. Since the military intervention in government lasted in 1999, contributions of the military regimes in this era will be discussed together in this lecture. The initial focus of the military regime was on the development of roads and communication networks, with little or no attention on housing delivery. Uncompleted housing programs of the sacked civilian government were thus abandoned and allowed to degenerate into derelict buildings. The military government later ventured into housing delivery, where it recorded some achievements. A major flaw of housing delivery strategy adopted during this era was perceiving housing delivery as government's sole effort. The government was thus the only sole provider of mass housing through the instrumentality of some federal agencies, such as the Federal Housing Authority. At the end of the military regime in 1999, it was realized that the plan of government agencies directly constructing 122,000 housing units under the National Housing Program and Prototype Housing Scheme in several states of the Federation was not achieved. The National Housing Policy of 2011 on page 18 summarized the housing development in Nigeria as at 1999 has been, I quote, so neglected by successive governments that for all practical purposes, a no housing situation existed in Nigeria, and about 60% of Nigerians could be said to be houseless persons, quote clauses. On taking over power from the last military administration on 29th of May 1999, the federal government adopted some strategies aimed at boosting housing provision in the country. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, it is sad to observe that all efforts by the government to date to ease access of the no, low, and medium income earners that constitutes the silent majority of Nigerians to adequate housing veered off the target. The failure of the various housing strategies to bring about significant improvement in housing for the poor majority of Nigerians is borne out by existing data on housing trends in housing deficit in the nation, which rose from 7 million in 1991 to 12 million in 2007, 14 million in 2010, and 17 million in 2015, as documented by Emir Daffy 2015. Without mincing words, it could be conveniently stated that the vast majority of Nigerians are yet to enjoy the dividends of democracy in terms of having access to adequate housing. The main culprit responsible for government's persistent failure to provide workable framework for adequate housing delivery for the vast majority of Nigerians will be unmasked in this inaugural lecture. But before the unmasking of the culprit, I would love to present before this august body some of my modest gradual contributions in the last 24 years to unmasking the culprit responsible for housing Nigerians becoming a paradox. My contributions to housing studies. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, my contributions to studies in housing development and management could be categorized under three main areas, which are: 1, legislations, manpower development, and housing. 2, effects of sociocultural characteristics on housing. And 3, strategies for housing delivery, legislations, manpower development, and housing. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, my realizing the importance of people comprehending provisions of various urban and regional planning legislations in achieving the goal of providing the most conducive housing environment for the people made me devote quality time between years 2000 and 2006 to reviewing the contents of various urban and regional planning legislations in Nigeria and providing guidelines on improving the effective implementation of their various provisions. These are documented in Sanni 2000, Adeyinka and Sanni 2003, Sanni and Adeyinka 2003, Sanni 2008, and Sanni 2006. Sanni and Adewale's 2010 studies based on Ikoyi and Victoria Island, Lagos, revealed that educational attainment and awareness of provisions of urban and regional planning regulations do not guarantee compliance, and brought to the fore the contributions of inadequate enforcement of provisions of urban and regional planning legislations to the poor housing condition, exacerbating the challenge of providing adequate housing in the country. Sanni's 2011 investigations on relationships between wages and supply of labor for housing construction in Shaki, Oyo State, revealed that wages do not have positive effect on chance of artisans' apprentices increasing. The need to modernize traditional apprenticeship system was emphasized by me. With the observed persistent decrease in the number of apprentice building artisans, it is not surprising that the eventual cost of finished housing units are high and almost unaffordable as labor costs are very high. Persistent decreasing number of apprentice building artisans also push the cost of embarking on new housing construction and of maintaining the quality of the existing housing stock beyond the capacity of majority of the citizenry, exacerbating inadequate housing in the country. Effects of socio-cultural characteristics on housing. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, my investigations on evolution of Ile-Ife city's morphology, documented in 1997, emphasized the importance of historical, cultural, and social forces in the resultant morphology of the city. Sanni and Adewale's 2007 studies revealed that, contrary to the expectations that the predominant educated Yorubas in the staff quarters of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, will adjust to the foreign environment, proliferation of non-residential uses in the staff quarters was the norm, with the staff quarters gradually having similar morphological structure of Yoruba traditional residential area. Finding from this study revolutionized my teaching of studio design in housing, as the importance of people's participation, especially in terms of incorporating their social and cultural needs into the design of the built environment, has since always been emphasized in my class. Sanni and Asisa's 2012 investigations on possible association between housing design and domestic conflicts in tenement buildings revealed strong association between incidents of conflict and types and housing types, with Brazilian housing, generally known as face-to-face houses, being most conflict-prone. Replacing Brazilian housing design with self-contained one-bedroom and two-bedroom apartments was proposed to minimize design-based conflicts in tenement buildings. Sanni and Bakare's 2014 investigations revealed that religious centers have overwhelming negative psychosocial effects on residents in housing estates, and proposed strategies to curb the menace of religious centers in residential estates. Strategies for housing delivery. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, Sanni and Inyoda's 2011 investigations on the effects of urban upgrading on housing quality in Lagos Island, Lagos, Nigeria, revealed that the program has brought about significant improvement in the environment with some attendant challenges. Strategies were proposed to reduce negative consequences of urban upgrading. Sanni and Adeowu's 2014 investigations revealed that despite some inconveniences that would be experienced during the course of implementation, housing maintenance / housing upgrading is economically, socially, psychologically, and culturally more viable than relocating the residents. The study therefore advocated the adoption of housing maintenance as a strategy to boost availability of adequate housing in the country. Sanni and Afolayan 2014 compared the performance of site and services scheme of the federal government and state government in Ilorin and found that the two schemes failed to bring about significant increase in housing stock in the city. Land grabbers and land speculators were identified as major culprits in the failure of the schemes. Strategies were proposed to eliminate activities of land grabbers and land speculators in government site and services scheme. Explaining the paradox. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, in the earlier part of this lecture, I did inform this audience that the main culprit responsible for the persistent failure of the Nigerian government to successfully tame the hydra-headed acute housing challenge in the country will be unveiled in this lecture. I will not renege on this promise. I only want to make a detour to really shed more light on this culprit. In elementary economics, we were taught that demand and supply are the two major factors in determining the equilibrium price in an open market. To maintain the equilibrium price, adequate simultaneous attention must be consistently given to both the demand and the supply side. This simple elementary economic rule is applicable to every form of market economy that involves supply and demand, housing market inclusive. In line with this general rule, the housing market of any area is driven by a range of demand and supply, which in this lecture I classify as the drivers of housing supply and the drivers of housing demand. These two drivers of housing market play a very prominent role in arriving at equilibrium in the housing market. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, Nigeria's policymakers have long identified and given adequate attention to the drivers of housing supply. Hence, the nation's housing policy makes concrete and elaborate provisions for drivers of housing supply, prominent among which are land, finance, building materials, manpower, maintenance, legal and administrative framework, and specific strategies. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, the demand side of the equation is consistently omitted in Nigeria's housing policy and programs, making achieving the goal of providing adequate housing for every Nigerian becoming a mirage. This is why housing Nigerians has become a paradox. The more you look, the less you see. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, for brevity of time, I will use the example of population dynamics, one of the drivers of housing demand, to drive home my point. It is on record that Nigeria experiences rapid population increase and rapid urbanization, which has led to rapid increase in the city's population at a rate much faster than the rate at which required ancillary facilities, amenities, and services, most especially housing, could be provided. The rapidly increasing populations are therefore accommodated in inhuman, inadequate, squalid housing that are easily proliferated in shanty settlements and slums, where the health, security, and convenience of the inhabitants are easily compromised. One of the major factors responsible for the observed persistent inadequate housing for Nigerians is the government's failure to acknowledge the symbiotic relationships between the urban and rural areas and adopt comprehensive regional development planning as a strategy to curtail and arrest the persistent streams of rural-urban migrants. Adapting regional development planning will ensure that the resources of each unit area are planned in order to maximize returns on investment and to improve the living conditions of the inhabitants of the areas concerned, as emphasized by Fanny around 1972. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, it is rather unfortunate to note that all physical development planning efforts in Nigeria at every tier of government is geared towards urban planning, concentrating all efforts on urban areas to the total neglect of their rural hinterlands. The vast rural areas are thus left unplanned, with their vast resources and potentialities untapped, necessitating the observed mass outflow of population to urban areas, where a majority of them end up swelling the army of unemployed, unemployable, and underemployed people in shanty towns and ghettos, exacerbating housing challenges in the nation. This, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, excuse me. This, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, is the aftermath of government's persistent refusal to take adequate care of drivers of housing demand exemplified by population dynamics. This is the genesis of housing paradox in Nigeria. Another factor that exacerbates housing paradox in Nigeria is the absence of reliable data on human and housing at community levels. All planning activities in the country lack the required adequate and reliable data on which the planning could be based. All we have are projections of estimated populations, which cannot adequately capture population dynamics that is very crucial to the success of planning activities. For instance, in various housing programs embarked upon by the Nigerian government, the supply side of housing is emphasized, and thousands of housing units are always earmarked for the various urban areas, especially the national and state capitals, without any tangible, reliable statistical information on the targeted would-be beneficiaries of the resultant housing units. Since the required number of housing units in each urban area is always a guesswork, and the rate of population increase in these urban areas far exceed the rate at which housing units are constructed, the intervention housing units are often dead on arrival, as the supply often end up being a mere drop in the mighty ocean. Hence, despite the billions of naira and other resources that must have been expended on various intervention programs, the programs always end up a mirage, a mere paradox. The way forward. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I would love to emphasize at this juncture that government's efforts to provide adequate housing for Nigerians will remain a paradox unless and until the population dynamics demand driver aspect of the demand and supply equation is given adequate attention and concerted efforts are made to achieve the provisions of the supply side of the equation already provided for in the nation's national housing policy. The first step in addressing the population dynamics of the various communities in Nigeria is the need to have a census devoid of political acrimonies in the country, supported by technologies such as GIS and satellite imageries. This point is very important since previous national census since 1991 obtained relevant data on human and housing that were never released for public consumption nor for development planning. To this end, it is important that full true enumeration of people and housing in every settlement in the country be made with adequate breakdown of the housing characteristics and socioeconomic characteristics of human population. This will serve as the required benchmark data for planning for their general development. For the first time in the history of the nation, conscious efforts should be made to prepare regional development plans to capture the symbiotic relationships between urban and rural communities within each region. In preparing regional development plan for the country, hierarchies of regions in form of political wards, local government areas, federal constituencies, senatorial districts, states and group of states should be established for regional development planning purposes. Hierarchies of settlements within the nation and regions should be established, and growth-inducing facilities, amenities, and services should be provided, equitably distributed in these regions to enhance optimal utilization of economic and employment activities in each region, thereby drastically reducing the present compulsion to migrate from rural to urban areas. The goal of the resultant regional development plans should be to stimulate human development in each region and maximize the utilization of each region's relative comparative advantage in arriving at the ideal economic and employment strategies to be adopted. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, we are strongly convinced that adopting the strategy proposed in this inaugural lecture requires the government at the federal, state, and local levels having the political will to conduct census on the people and housing in the country and ensure that the resultant data are made available for national development planning. Government also need to have the political will to address the supply and demand drivers of housing by addressing the interference and uncoordinated population dynamics. I repeat, to have the political will to address the supply and demand drivers of housing by addressing the interference of uncoordinated population dynamics on our various national development plans and programs. This, we strongly believe, will assist a lot in achieving the targeted dream of making every Nigerian have access to adequate housing, either as renters or owners, as contained in the nation's national housing policy. Acknowledgement. The preparation of today's inaugural lecture owes much to invaluable contributions of many persons, some of who have transited to glory. Some are unavoidably absent at today's gathering, while many are in this assembly. I give all glory, all honor, and all adoration to the Almighty God for giving me the privilege to present an inaugural lecture. I also give God all the gratitude for surrounding me with people and circumstances that ultimately favored my being qualified to present today's inaugural lecture. For instance, God placed me in a family in which I enjoy unlimited love and affection right from my cradle, from members of the large families of my parents, the Sanni family of Obalufon lineage, usually abbreviated as Sanni, S-A-N-N-I, and the Elutidoye family of Opa lineage, and the larger extended family structure in which I was raised. After being married to my wife, my in-laws, their latents, shower me with love. For brevity of time, my specific acknowledgement will be limited to some few individuals, institutions, and organizations. I acknowledge the invaluable contributions of my late parents, Baba Samuel Adayese Botanilowole Sanni, and Mama Comfort Kokuma Oladoni Opa Sanni Nelutidoye, for sacrificing their personal comfort to give me sound education that enabled me qualify to present today's inaugural lecture. I acknowledge invaluable contributions of my siblings, Dr. Michael Rotimi Sanni, Mr. Anthony Adeshina Sanni, Mr. Adegboye Sanni, Mr. Kolawole Sanni, Mr. Bolariwa Sanni, Mr. Babatunde Sanni, Mrs. Folake Bamidele, Mrs. Toyin Adelabu, Mr. Omalolu Sanni, Professor Abiola Sanni, Mr. Olatunde Sanni, Mr. Akim Sanni, and Mrs. Ajoke Adewoye. I acknowledge various invaluable contributions of my second parents, Baba Joseph Oladapo Aletan, of blessed memory, and Mama Esther Ido Aletan, and their biological children and children-in-law. All my cousins, nephews, nieces, uncles, aunts, in-laws, and relatives from far and near, I really appreciate you all. Thank you. I acknowledge invaluable contributions of my teachers, right from my primary one in 1962. For emphasis, my teachers, classmates, and schoolmates at St. Bernard's Catholic Primary School, Lagire, Iremo, Ile-Ife. I thank you all. My teachers, schoolmates, and classmates at St. John's Catholic Grammar School, Ilode, Ile-Ife, Johnnian Eagles. I thank you all. My lecturers, schoolmates, and especially members of the pioneering set of the then Oyo State College of Education, now Osun State College of Education in Ilesha. I thank you all. My lecturers, classmates, schoolmates, and colleagues at the University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University, Great Ife. I thank you all. And last but not the least, my lecturers, classmates, schoolmates, and colleagues at the University of Ibadan, greatest UIs. I thank you all. You have all contributed immensely to blessing me and making me what I am today. I acknowledge special roles played by the following mentors, Professor Elo Olajuyin of blessed memory, Mr. Fumi Eniayewu, Mr. Tio Ogumodede, a.k.a. Baba Onigba, Mr. F.A. Babalola of Federal Poly Nasarawa, Federal Poly Laru, Mr. Tunde Arulogun and his family, Professor Afolabi Okiwole, Professor Rom Kalilu, Professor Yinka Adeshina, Professor Akinola Aguda, Professor Oluwole Aloba, Professor Wale Fadare, and Professor S.I. Abumere of blessed memory. I acknowledge the contributions of my Christian brothers and sisters in the Methodist family, especially my brethren in Bodija Circuit, Ibadan, the presbyter, the very Reverend D.F. Adekoya, the assistant minister, the Reverend O.S.A. Abati, all ministers, all stewards, and brethren. I thank our co-landlords, landladies, residents of Ebenezer Landlord Association, Alakia Iyana Church, Ibadan, entire members of staff of the Faculty of B Social Sciences, the only faculty that has a D. I thank you all. I thank all my colleagues from my previous stations, the Federal Polytechnic Nasarawa, Lautech Ogbomoso, OAU Ile-Ife, and OOU Agoiwoye. I thank you all. All my personal and family friends, colleagues, and students from far and near, I thank you and acknowledge your contributions to my life. I like to thank and acknowledge invaluable contributions of my highly esteemed colleagues in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning towards the success of this lecture. Dr. A.M. Alabi, my HOD, Professors T.O. Egunjobi, S.B. Agola, C.O. Olatubara, and O. Ojo, Doctors W.B. Wahab, O. Ipingbemi, J.O. Omiri, U.U. Jimo, F.O. Kazim, and S.K. Ojuluwo. I thank all non-academic staff of the department for their various contributions, I appreciate the immeasurable contributions of my darling wife, Chief Dr. Oluyemisi Bamidele Sanni. I met her in a penultimate year at Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, and she has since held my heart. She is the most precious jewel God ever gave a man. She is my wife, my dearest and closest friend, my mother since the death of Opa, and the mother of my siblings, and the mother of my children. She is a very strong pillar behind me. Since I met her, she has been very supportive of me, guiding and encouraging me to always put in my best to bring out God's implanted talents in me. Thank you for giving me true unconditional love. My two sons, Ifedayo Oluwaseun and Oluwafikayo Tomisi, I acknowledge your invaluable contributions to the success of this day. Together with their mother, they sacrificed their time and needed attention to provide the most conducive home front for my academic musings, especially while I was climbing the academic ladder. I thank the three of you for the various review of draft of the lecture. Distinguished scholars, ladies and gentlemen, thank you most sincerely for listening.